The Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew, the 22nd chapter. Then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap Jesus in what he said. So they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere and teach the way of God in accordance with truth, and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. Then he said to them, "Whose head is this, and whose title?" They answered, "The emperor's." Then he said to them, "Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. The Gospel of the Lord.
I want to introduce you to three of the most powerful words in the human language. Yes, I love you is toward the top of that list, and also towards the top of that list is my favorite three-word phrase, how are you? A question that I believe when we ask it sincerely leads to all sorts of beautiful conversations. But there is one more three-word phrase that is also very important. I don't know. I don't know. Now, I suspect that saying I don't know seems like an admission of failure to many in our culture, especially those of us who have been to college and graduate school, as if admitting any kind of ignorance somehow undermines the validity of our diplomas. But I'd like to offer you another slant, as I think that telling another person I don't know offers an invitation for them to share what they know. Or sometimes even better, to join you in together figuring something out. Now this becomes especially true when you pair those three words with four other words, what do you think? And so when we put those two together in a combination, it comes out, I don't know, what do you think? Well, that can be incredibly empowering. Now, I do this with my grandchildren. They'll ask one of those brilliant questions that little ones sometimes ask. And the papa happens to also be a pastor, and so I tend to get the questions about God. Well, I found the correct answer is almost always, I don't know, what do you think? First, it gets me off the hook, but I'm often surprised at what fascinating things that come out of their little mouths about the subject matter in question, none of which I'd have heard if I'd just given them a quick answer. In fact, I suspect that my rush to a quick and definitive answer precludes any sort of meaningful conversation. Now, that's easier to do with my grandkiddos than it is to do with adults. You see, when it comes to adults, I don't want to look stupid. And two, I often don't take the time that a really good and well-composed question requires. But what if we slowed down and risk admitting the limits to our knowledge, even though we might appear a little less brilliant than we'd like to appear, and thereby empower others to think for themselves and together figure some important things out? Now, if you engage me over this, I'd suggest that this week's gospel reading from Matthew, it offers us a perfect opportunity to do just that. Well, you know the scene. The Pharisees are once again trying to trap Jesus with a question. This time they asked him a politically loaded question. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor? And Jesus once again foils their plans, this time by replying, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God. Wow, it's a fabulous answer, don't you think? And the lesson says even the Pharisees walk away amazed. Except, what exactly does it mean? I don't know. What do you think? Most biblical scholars agree on two interpretive elements of this passage. First, separation of church and state, which this text is often employed to support, but that's a very modern interpretation. It's highly unlikely that a devout Jew of the first century would imagine that clean separation of their lives into a political realm and a religious realm that we are often accustomed to. And second, the coin produced had not only the likeness, the icon of Caesar, but probably also had the title Son of God beneath Caesar. You see, when an emperor died, they were automatically elevated to deity status. In other words, they became a god. And if you happen to be in the Revelation Bible study that we did, then you know when that became especially tricky, especially tough for the early Christians, when Roman Emperor Domitian, who ruled from AD 81 to 96, he decided he didn't want to wait until he died to be a god. And so he demanded the people worship him as a god while he was still living, placing Christians between a horrible rock and a hard place. Well, back to the coin in the gospel lesson. The very possessing of it betrays the Pharisees' sincerity and reveals their hypocrisy. For here they are in the temple where Jesus is teaching, and they bring a coin tantamount to bringing into the holy place a symbol of idolatry and a violation of the first two commandments. So is Jesus saying that we owe nothing to a false god like Caesar and should reserve all things for the one and only true God? I don't know. What do you think? Or is he inviting us to recognize that while we may in fact owe the emperors of this world some things like taxes, we owe God other things like our whole selves? I don't know. What do you think? Or is Jesus inviting us to avoid giving our allegiance to the material and the temporal things of this world that our coins can buy, all the while demanding our ultimate devotion go to God? Again, I don't know. What do you think? Now I'm going to guess, and it's really only that Jesus isn't advocating a full-scale retreat from the economic and political dimensions of our lives, but instead is helping us to recognize that all of these things are part of God's larger divine economy. That is, I think Jesus invites us to think regularly about how all of our decisions, what we buy, who we vote for, what we walk for like health equity, or march for like gay pride, how we spend our time and allocate our resources, what we do with the environment, and yes, even who we put in the White House, that any and all of these decisions might be shaped by our understanding that the whole world is God's and everything in it, including us. But what does that mean? Or more to the point, how can our faith actually shape our daily decisions? And since our bank accounts are often extensions of our hearts and our value systems a sign of our priorities, how can faith shape our economic decisions as well? Well, as it turns out, this can be incredibly tricky business. Ask your church council. We happen to be a congregation blessed with abundant generosity, both from you, from within, from you, and from without, by other folks who see what we're doing at River of Hope as worthy of their investment as well. Well, having money creates a lot of interesting conversations for our leadership. And I know you won't be surprised by this. It also creates plenty of conflict as well. Sometimes it might just be easier to be a normal congregation without any resources. But even beyond our mission and our ministry, there's probably not a person in our faith community who doesn't think about these things a fair amount in their own personal life. For some, it's a question of how much do I spend on themselves or give away. Well, for others, it's a desire to pass on their values about money to their kids or their grandkids. Whatever their questions, however, almost everyone I know wrestles to some degree with this sort of stuff. But here's where we make the mistake as the church. And we become the conventional church with conventional thinking. We pretend to know the right answers. And the pastor or the stewardship team or those in leadership who believe themselves to be the experts, they all stand ready and willing to give us the correct formulas, the right answers, the proper postures, and we have to do very little thinking for ourselves. And I did include the pastor in that, right? Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure you heard that. You know, what if we went at it a different way? What if for all our collective years of experience, with all of its collective wisdom, we started with perhaps a more truthful answer to the big questions we face, a more transparent disclosure, and we said, you know, there are just some things I don't know, and I'm just doing my best, as are you, to figure them out. And plenty of these unknowns have to do with faith and how we live that out in our daily and everyday lives. What if we started using the phrase, I don't know, what do you think? Engaging one another in a partnership of dialogue whereby we might just arrive at an answer together, or perhaps we'll never arrive at an answer, but still be bound together in the refining of the question. And maybe, just maybe, we might discover comfort in the fact that we are among others who do not have all the answers, and that we share a common denominator. We are people still trying to figure things out, still trying to find our way, still trying to get it together. I'll let you in on a little secret. Prior to coming to Palm Springs, I sat down with Bishop Guy Irwin, who at that time was the Bishop of Southern California West Synod of our denomination. It's not our synod, we're Pacifica, but since West Synod encompasses Los Angeles and Hollywood and Long Beach and more, I wanted to get his scoop on our work out here, not only because he was the first gay bishop of the ELCA, but because he and many of his people, they frequent Palm Springs, and they might just be looking for a church when they're out here. Well, he was honest with his unknowingness, and he asked me, how does one start a brand new church these days? And I responded with a similar honesty. I told him, I have no idea. For all my training, all my years of experience, my certifications from pastor developer schools, plural, I still really have no idea. Oh, I have lots of tools, I have plenty of resources, some really great connections, and I think I have pretty decent people skills, and most of the time I have a trust in God, and I've applied all this diligently and faithfully to this work, but how this has all happened isn't about my knowingness. It's about our partnership and our remaining open to the Spirit of God moving among us. And where that mystery has become most profound has been in those moments when we didn't know what to do, not when we did. COVID is the best example of that. This ministry has become what it has become when we all said, I don't know. What do you think? And then little by little we figured it out together. Isn't that the real partnership that we share with one another as people of God? Not just when it comes to church, but when it comes to our lives. What a beautiful thing to be able to say, I don't know. And then rely on the strength, the wisdom, the guidance, the example of those in the larger community. And when all of us say together, I don't know, to know that there is grace to head out into directions of which we are unsure, of destinations unknown, and to know one final thing, that none of us ever ventures too far in the wrong direction, that there is not a way back, that there is no failure ever too big from which we cannot recover, no past decision that is without potential to be redeemed. Always grace, always hope, always possibility. We are only limited by our imagination. What a great thing today in response to the gospel lesson, as an example, to be able to turn to one another and say, what do you think Jesus means? What things are Caesar's and what are God's? And how does our faith shape our economic decisions, our buying, our saving, our giving, and the rest? Now, you might be surprised by the insights people share. Maybe it could even help us as we enter now into stewardship mode, asking, What one question about the relationship between faith and money would you most like to talk about at church? Not, here's what we want you to know about stewardship. Not, here's what we want you to do with stewardship. But what questions can we explore together, and where might the exploration of those questions lead? To great adventures where we can celebrate all sorts of things? Oh, I hope so. Or maybe to some horrible, tough places where we'll regret the decisions we made, scrambling for course corrections. I hope, though, by becoming a questioning church, we can get more folks involved in interpreting gospel lessons like the one we have before us today, instead of just listening to me interpret them. I hope that we will all become more empowered to think through our faith with each other, that we will all make the incredibly important connection between faith and daily life, and discover that the church really is a place where we can find support in thinking through the things that matter to us all. Will it work? I don't know. What do you think? Amen.